The name of this video is Why We Must Believe in Evolution, Part 1. Well, there are basically two reasons that we must believe in the theory of evolution, and neither of these has to do with science. You can see evolutionsecrets.com to learn some more of these contradictions with science. Well, the scientific evidence that contradicts the theory of evolution has turned into a tsunami over the last few decades. So why do people believe in the theory? It is simply because the alternative is not acceptable. Plain and simple. Humans have a tendency to believe something because of their past experiences. This includes all education, propaganda, and I must add here, not all propaganda is bad, experiences and knowledge gathered over the years. Much of this experience has nothing to do with true science, but with philosophy. And our philosophy of life can determine the way that we think about everything. The theory of evolution is no exception. You see, the only alternatives to the theory of evolution is special creation and intelligent design. There are really no other alternatives. You believe in evolution or creationism. But creationism and intelligent design bring with them some very weighty assumptions. If there was creation or intelligent design, then there was a creator or a designer. But that simply implies that there are laws of nature and society, which include moral laws, set up by the creator that must be adhered to, or there are serious. And that was the reason that evolution caught on so fast and is still pushed so hard, even though it has been disproved in dozens of ways. Dr. George Wald, Nobel Prize winner in biology in 1971, summarized the quandary when he admitted, "There are only two possible explanations as to how life arose. Spontaneous generation, that is a belief that life can just appear or begin by itself, arising to evolution, or a supernatural creative act of God." He then confessed, there is no other possibility. Now, spontaneous generation was scientifically disproved 120 years ago by Louis Pasteur and others. But that just leaves us with only one other possibility, that life came as a supernatural act of creation by God. But I can't accept that philosophy because I do not want to believe in God. Therefore, I choose to believe in that which I know is scientifically impossible: spontaneous generation leading to evolution. And this is the basic reason that evolution is being pushed so strongly. The alternative is simply unthinkable to most of these scientists. Now, that is not necessarily why most of us have believed in the theory of evolution. A good number of us believed it because that is what we were taught. And our teachers, well, they were taught the same thing, and their teachers and professors were taught the same thing, and so on and so forth. When did you learn the theory of evolution? Well, if you were like me, I began learning it when I was in first or second grade. Now, I remember discussing the theory with my brothers. We were a fairly science-minded family. In fact, two of them later on became engineers. And this theory was reinforced through high school and the university. In essence, I had received the evolution propaganda throughout most of my formative years, ages 5 through 25. Well, this is the time that almost all evolutionists are convinced that their theory is true. Now there are literally hundreds or even thousands of scientists that have rejected much or all of the theory of evolution. That does not mean that they have jumped on board with creationists or those that believe in intelligent design. Some of those scientists now just simply have no country. But the question is why? Why have they rejected it? And even more importantly, when did they reject the idea? Well, let's look at the last question first. When do a majority of these scientists that jump ship do so? It is after they receive their university education and begin doing extensive research in a specific discipline of science. For example, a microbiologist begins doing extensive study into the function of different parts of a living cell and then realizes that it could not have occurred accidentally. But why does this happen? Because they go beyond the typical propaganda that they have been fed for the last 10 or 15 years. Now, this does not usually take place until they realize that the old explanations are not sufficient to clarify certain facts about life. So, most of us have learned the theory in our formative years, but a huge majority of those that reject it do so because of the information that goes beyond the typical textbook. One of the things that has stunned me over the years, and I include in almost all anything that I write or say, is that almost everything that is in our textbooks today that quote prove evolution has been disproved literally decades ago. No knowledgeable scientist, evolutionist today believes that the fossil record supports the theory of evolution over creationism, that science has an explanation of how life began accidentally, that mutations can possibly bring about any evolution. That is, by the way, supposedly the vehicle for evolution. And that mathematically it is even possible for all of the things necessary to occur for evolution to ever take place, etc., etc., etc. The list goes on and on. Scores of facts and discoveries have put huge holes in the theory. Are you aware, for instance, now that carbon 14 tests have shown that dinosaurs have lived just a few thousand years ago instead of more than 65 million years ago, as we were told? Of course, that by itself eliminates evolution altogether. Evolutionists are admitting that there are serious flaws with the theory. But there is a huge problem. If anyone exposes one of these flaws, they may never be heard from again. And I'm talking figuratively here. As an educator, by even mentioning an alternative view, they will probably lose their job. As a scientist, they will probably lose any ability to speak into the scientific community. They will literally be banned. Now, I know this sounds a little like the Gulag in the former Soviet Union, when dissenters were simply banned and sent to the Gulag where they were never heard from again. But this type of treatment of any dissenters is very common. In other words, the primary way to win the debate is simply to eliminate any competition. This kind of treatment to the dissenter seems to be the rule and not the exception. Watch Ben Stein's Expelled for more documentation on that kind of treatment in our country. Well, ironically, it was just a few decades ago that evolutionists were attempting to get their views heard by the public. Now it has reversed, and it is very difficult for anyone from the creationist or intelligent design camp to be heard from. This will continue on Why We Must Believe in Evolution, Part 2.